There's a heart shape on ancient Roman coins that has nothing to do with love. It's a seed pod. From a plant that could stop a pregnancy, season a meal, and treat a fever, sometimes all in the same week. Siren, the city that controlled it, became one of the richest cities in North Africa because of it. And within a few generations, that plant vanished so completely that today, most historians aren't sure they'd recognize it if it was standing in front of them. 26 centuries ago, on a strip of coastline in what's now eastern Libya, a wild plant started growing that nobody had planted and nobody could explain. The Greeks who settled the city of Siren called it silphium, thick branching root, hollow stalk, clusters of yellow flowers. From that stalk came a resin they called laser. People ate it. It seasoned everything from lentils to an entire roasted flamingo. People used it as medicine, coughs, fevers, sore throats, snakebite. And people used it as birth control, reliably enough that Roman writers described it as one of the ancient world's most trusted contraceptives. Food, medicine, birth control. One uncultivable plant, doing the work of 3 separate industries. A city built its economy around it. Cyrenaic coins from the 4th century BC don't show a king's face. They show the plant itself, sometimes with that seed pod shape you just saw. When something replaces the ruler's portrait on your currency, it's not a crop. It's the reason your city exists. And then Rome took over the Mediterranean, and silphium didn't stay a regional specialty. It became a strategic reserve. Julius Caesar withdrew 1,500 pounds of the plant's resin from the public treasury to help fund his civil war against Pompey, stored next to the actual gold and silver, because that's genuinely the tier it occupied. Something stored beside the imperial gold reserve doesn't just quietly run out. So what happened to it is worth taking seriously. Here's the fact that makes this dangerous instead of just interesting. Nobody could reliably cultivate silphium. Every attempt to transplant it outside its narrow strip of Cyrenaican coastline failed. Which meant every piece of silphium the Mediterranean world consumed had to come from the same wild population. There was no farm somewhere producing more. No field waiting on next year's harvest. Just one strip of land, roughly 125 miles long, that the entire supply depended on, forever. Ancient physicians built real medical practice around it anyway. It shows up in the major pharmacology texts of the era. It was popular enough that a comic playwright wrote a song mocking crooked silphium dealers who cut their product to stretch the profit. Which tells you 2 things. People wanted it badly enough to fake it, and by then, the real thing was already getting hard to find. Siren's coins carried the plant. Its merchants traded almost nothing else at this scale. Its wealth depended on a single wild species nobody knew how to reproduce. Imagine building an entire city's economy on one plant you can't replant. Siren had every reason in the world to protect that supply. Better than anyone else alive, they understood exactly how fragile it was. And it disappeared anyway. By the era of the Emperor Nero, the record says there was only 1 stalk left. One stalk. In the entire world. Pliny the Elder wrote that Emperor Nero owned the last known stalk of silphium, presented to him as a curiosity, not something anyone could still buy. Pliny spent 37 books cataloging the natural world. Silphium got some of his most detailed attention. And when he explained why it vanished, he didn't hedge. He blamed tax farmers, officials leasing the pastureland who realized they'd make more short-term profit grazing sheep on it than protecting the harvest, and stripped it bare. Greed. Plain and simple. A tragedy of the commons, recorded in real time by the one writer paying close enough attention to notice. Case closed. Except it wasn't. If you're into the ancient world's genuine unsolved mysteries, subscribe now. This channel's built for exactly this kind of case. Pliny wasn't the only ancient writer who addressed what happened. And the other account doesn't match his at all. 3 explanations, once you line them all up. Claim 1, Pliny, overgrazing. Tax farmers, short-term greed. Claim 2, Strabo, writing decades earlier. The plant was nearly destroyed by a barbarian invasion, though he never named the invaders or gave a date. Claim 3, the land itself. That narrow 125-mile strip was already at the edge of what this plant could tolerate. A region living on that margin doesn't need a conspiracy to lose a wild species. It just needs the margin to shift. 3 explanations. They can't all be the whole story, but there's one assumption every single one of them makes. That silphium actually died. What if it didn't? A botanist. A volcano in central Turkey, hundreds of miles from anywhere silphium was ever recorded. A strange, unusually tall plant with golden flowers. That's what Mehmet Miski found on Mount Hassan in 1983. He didn't think much of it. It had already been catalogued once, decades earlier, as Ferula druidiana. It took him almost 20 years to notice what was in front of him. The local sheep and goats were drawn to its leaves, exactly what Pliny described about silphium 18 centuries earlier. It bloomed suddenly and violently after heavy spring rain, just like the ancient accounts. He compared its shape to the plant carved on Cyrenaic coins. The thick branching root. The umbrella-shaped flower cluster. The resemblance wasn't subtle. Then came the chemistry. Ferula druidiana carries anticancer and anti-inflammatory compounds, the same broad category of properties ancient writers attributed to silphium. And it grows in exactly 2 places on Earth. Both were once settled by ancient Greek colonists. Could this be silphium? Maybe. No surviving ancient specimen exists to run a direct comparison against, so this can't currently be proven either way. That raises an extraordinary possibility. Perhaps silphium didn't disappear everywhere. Perhaps we simply lost track of it. We were told this plant went extinct. First recorded extinction in human history, some historians call it. The evidence for exactly how, and whether it's even true, isn't conclusive. Pliny blamed greed. Strabo blamed war. The land itself was working against it from the start. And now there's a plant growing on a Turkish volcano that fits the description almost too well, that we can't prove is the same species, and can't prove isn't. So after 2,000 years, the case doesn't close. It just goes quiet. If you want to be here when the next unsolved case drops, subscribe. Thanks for watching.